Okay, welcome back everyone. We're still on problem 25-5A dealing with the sales mix, and this is part 2 of the demonstration where we're going to address the third requirement, which says if the company adds a second shift, how many units of product in G and B should it produce, and how much total contribution margin would this mix produce each month, and should they add the second mix? Okay, well, you have the answer to part 1 in this section above the line. Part 2 is down here, and I've drawn another line where we can start on part 3. Okay, let me slide down to give us a little bit of room here to work. Now, on part 3, we already know, well, let me slide a little bit back up, and then I'll slide back down. From part 1, we know that we make a much greater margin on product G than B, 100 versus 35. So we want to maximize the number that we can make. Well, if we add a second shift, we would double the contribution margin and double the output, right? So if we've already determined 17.6, we would double the output. However, the maximum demand for our product is 400 units. Okay, if we double the 220, right, times 2, we would come up with 440 units. Well, that's 40 units too much. So what we should do is make the units of product G, I just label these here, G and B, with a second shift, doubling the number of units. Okay, we should limit that to the market capacity or market demand of 400 units for G. Let's go ahead and center this and underline these so we know what we're doing. You know what, I'll right center them. And that leaves us with a certain number of hours left to produce units of B. Well, how can we calculate that? How about if we do that over here? How many units did it take to make 400? We know that it takes 0.8 hours per unit from above, right? Okay, so why don't we just say what was the hours to produce? And it's going to be equal 400 times, and I'll slide up till we find that 0.8 right there, okay? Now you won't see that answer, so let me slide back down so you can see that. And all I've done is I've referenced in this cell 400 times above on part 1 where we had 0.8. Now, to even make that easier, I'll just correct this and retype it again, 0.8. So we know it's going to take 320 hours to produce. Now let's take a look at how many hours we have in total to work with. Well, we have 176 hours calculated in the previous demonstration for one shift. But now we have to double that, and I'll just put the calculation right up there for 2 shifts. Okay, so how many remaining hours do we have to make B's product? Well, we can take that 352 and back it off from the 320 hours to produce, right? And that leaves us with 32 hours to produce product B. Well, how many units can we make? Well, we know from above it takes 2 hours per unit to make that. So if we take the 32 hours and divide it by 2, we know we can make 16 units. So we need to make 400 units of G and 16 units of B. Now, I haven't really laid this out in a particularly logical fashion, but you know what? I think that's okay. Let's go ahead and do that calculation here. We'll put the units. We'll put the contribution per unit. I'm going to put contribution dollar per unit. We'll use an abbreviation, and we'll come up with what's our total contribution margin or total contribution. We'll put that right there. Maybe widen this just a hair so you can see that. Okay, so now to make that calculation look like a nice accountant's table, units to produce are 400. Here the units to produce are 16, right? Contribution margin, we know from previously, is equal to $80. We've calculated that above. Right? Now, if we're going to calculate this one, we would grab that contribution margin again from above, which is $70, right? Let me slide up so you can see the work. Then multiply it across. So 32,000, 1,120. And I will just write a total here for total contribution margin. And I'm running out of room, so I'm going to abbreviate. And we'll just add those two cells or sum it, however you prefer. And that is, I'll bold that. That's the final number we were looking for. And that takes care of the third requirement.